cause of death was listed as natural. The medical examiner disagreed. Upon conducting a thorough forensic examination, a traumatic injury was detected, leading to the reclassification of the manner of death. This case began on a quiet Wednesday evening when neighbors reported a disturbance at a residence in the city's downtown area. Initially, emergency services responded to what was thought to be a routine medical call for an elderly man who had fallen at home. Upon arrival, the paramedics found the residence in disarray, with overturned furniture and signs of a struggle. The deceased, an elderly male, was discovered lying supine on the floor with visible head injuries. His family assumed it was a fall, but the medical examiner's preliminary assessment indicated more than a simple accident. The case background unfolded in a residential apartment on the third floor of a downtown building. The initial report was made at 7:15 p.m. by concerned neighbors who heard loud noises coming from the apartment. Emergency services arrived shortly thereafter, and upon entering the apartment, they observed a chaotic scene. Furniture was displaced, and there were signs of a struggle on the floor and around the living room. The deceased, identified by his family as the occupant, was found lying supine on the floor, wearing only his pajamas. His eyes were open and glassy, and his body was cold to the touch, indicating that death had occurred some time prior to discovery. The neighbors believed the disturbance was due to a fall, but the scene's disarray and the condition of the body suggested otherwise. The family, upon arrival, confirmed that the deceased had a history of mild cognitive impairment and had been prone to wandering, which may have contributed to the initial assumption of a fall. However, the medical examiner's assessment of the injuries and the overall scene indicated a need for a more detailed investigation. The first responder observations provided critical initial findings. The scene was marked by overturned furniture, scattered personal items, and signs of a violent struggle. The deceased was found in the living room, lying supine with a large hematoma on the right side of the head, extending from the parietal region to the occipital area. There were no defensive wounds or signs of a struggle on the hands or forearms, suggesting the injury was inflicted while the deceased was incapacitated. Initial assessments by the paramedics noted the absence of a pulse and fixed, dilated pupils. The body was cold, indicating a postmortem interval of several hours. The initial manner of death was classified as undetermined, pending further investigation. The presence of the extensive cranial injury, combined with the lack of defensive wounds and the chaotic scene, prompted the medical examiner to order a full autopsy and forensic analysis. The forensic investigation began with the meticulous collection of physical evidence from the scene. The crime scene investigator carefully documented the layout of the apartment and collected numerous items, including bloodstains on the floor and walls, as well as a broken porcelain vase found near the deceased's head. The broken vase was placed in a sterile container and sealed, with the chain of custody meticulously recorded. Notable was the absence of any obvious weapon, leading to speculation about the nature of the causative agent. The collection process also included swabs from the deceased's hands and clothing for DNA and trace evidence analysis, along with samples of the floor and wall stains. The unexpected finding was the presence of small fragments of glass embedded in the deceased's scalp, which suggested that the injury might have been caused by a glass object. The laboratory analysis involved a comprehensive array of tests aimed at establishing the cause and manner of death. Toxicology screens were run on the deceased's blood and urine, focusing on common substances such as alcohol, opiates, and other pharmaceuticals. The results showed no significant levels of these substances, indicating no intoxication at the time of death. Pathology analysis included detailed histological examination of tissue samples from the brain and the scalp. Microscopic findings revealed extensive shearing and tearing of the brain tissue, consistent with blunt force trauma. Concentrations of red blood cells in the cerebrospinal fluid indicated bleeding into the subarachnoid space. The tests also confirmed the presence of glass fragments in the scalp tissue, supporting the initial hypothesis of a glass object as the causative agent. These findings provided crucial evidence linking the broken vase to the injury sustained by the deceased. Reconstructing the timeline of events was essential for understanding the sequence of the incident. The postmortem interval was estimated using the degree of rigor mortis and livor mortis, indicating death had occurred approximately 4 to 6 hours before the body was discovered. The broken vase and the presence of glass fragments on the deceased's scalp suggested that the injury was inflicted shortly before death. The chaotic state of the apartment, with furniture overturned and items scattered, indicated a struggle that occurred before the injury. The timeline confirmed the initial assumption of a fall was incorrect, as the injuries were too severe and specific to be consistent with a fall from a standing position. The physical evidence and the absence of defensive wounds suggested that the deceased was incapacitated at the time of the injury, likely due to the initial struggle or a pre-existing condition. Expert testimony from the forensic pathologist and toxicologist provided clarity on the significance of the findings. The expert would state under oath that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, with a high confidence level based on the histological and toxicology results. The expert opinion was that the broken vase and the glass fragments were the most likely causative agents of the fatal injury. However, there were some uncertainties regarding the exact mechanism of the injury and the sequence of events leading up to it. The expert would also note that the absence of defensive wounds and the chaotic scene indicated a struggle, but the exact nature of the struggle and the identity of the person or object causing the injury remained speculative. The evidence was conclusive regarding the injury itself, but left room for interpretation regarding the circumstances leading to the injury. The resolution of the case involved a reclassification of the manner of death from undetermined to homicide. The forensic evidence, including the presence of glass fragments and the chaotic scene, provided strong support for the hypothesis that the injury was inflicted by a glass object, likely a vase. The initial assessment of a fall was incorrect, as the injuries were too severe and specific to be consistent with a fall. The medical examiner's reclassification was based on the comprehensive forensic investigation, including the autopsy findings and the toxicology results. The evidence established that the traumatic injury was the cause of death, contradicting the initial assumption of a natural death due to a fall. The resolution demonstrated the importance of a thorough forensic investigation in establishing the true cause and manner of death. The file remains open.